from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with the 31 days of gangster films and cop films from the year 1970 to the present day. Now, as I've mentioned before, I fully admit that such expanse of years is a wide and vast one, perhaps too vast or too wide. However, at the same time, I think that also affords one the opportunity to hopefully choose from a real variety and wealth of possible films or possible topics of discussion for purposes of things like the 31 days and other cinema-related discussions and talks, etc. So that is the hope and that is the plan. And I hope that over the course of these 31 days, something close to that is achieved. If not, I truly apologize, but that is the objective of this, is to hopefully have a good time talking about this thing that we all love, which is cinema, and specifically cinema from these particular genres. Now, for this particular video, I'd like to focus in on the gangster genre, and for that I have selected a film which is a very special and very iconic film. It is a classic in the genre. It is a classic masterpiece from a filmmaker whose name will appear many times throughout the course of the 31 days. And so this isn't the last time we will hear of the name of this filmmaker, who is Martin Scorsese. And this film is by Martin Scorsese is described as being from 1973. And it has in its sterling, incredible cast people like Harvey Keitel and Robert De Niro, who play Charlie and Johnny Boy, respectively. And of course, I'm speaking about that iconic work, which is Mean Streets. Wow, where to begin when one tries to talk about Mean Streets? I mean, it is such a thoroughly classic masterpiece, iconic work, and there are so many places to go because it is so packed with information and themes and complexities and moral ambiguities and nuance, as well as moments of humor and that lovely intimate touch that I think Martin Scorsese is also known for, as well as handling these situations of describing or perhaps even critiquing the main characters that we begin to know and become associated with as viewers of this film, as the film progresses through its really incredible pace and the running time. And of course, among those characters that we meet are the Harvey Keitel character and the Robert De Niro character, excuse me, Charlie and Johnny Boy. And perhaps to be even more specific, we could describe this film, Mean Streets, as being about Charlie, the Harvey Keitel character, and his perceptions of the outside world on the one hand, and also his perceptions of himself and the interior world that he and his soul and his heart and his mind inhabit on the other hand. And so when we're talking about these two points of perception, the exterior point, we are talking about the exterior environment, which is New York, or to be specific, Little Italy in New York. And if we are to flesh out the discussion of that exterior environment even further, we can talk about the people that we meet that inhabit this particular world, or the pockets of the world that we are privy to as the film progresses. So we meet Charlie and Johnny Boy and other people in this close-knit community that are associated with various, say, landmarks within this community. Also, we see or meet, or we realize and understand just how these various relationships are affecting the characters like Charlie and Johnny Boy in a maybe in a day-to-day mundane routine type of way on the one hand, or perhaps how those details of the mundane day-to-day routine might slowly build and build and build and build to what might be described as being a type of climax or boiling point. And I use these phrases too because we also understand that this environment, the external world, the society, has to do with friendship, with love, with passion, desire, intimacy. It also has to do with external perceptions, and also has to do with crime and the criminal world, and links to the mob and the mafia. And perhaps these links, when we examine them in the context of the stories of Charlie and Johnny Boy and others, maybe they can be described as being low to mid-level in terms of the hierarchy, if you will, the mob hierarchy. So we're dealing with the street level. And these are people, these are characters that are unabashedly and without shame. They are, and one could say that they would admit themselves to being characters who are living in the streets, who are of the streets, who are of the street life. Thus the character, thus the title in question being The Streets, Mean Streets. But they, as I say, are unabashedly so, and they do so without shame and without a type of regret or remorse. Or perhaps one can take a step back and begin to question whether or not they are truly without regret, or maybe there is some sense of regret or remorse or guilt that creeps in to the psychologies of these characters as we see them go from activity to activity, from scene to scene, from scenario to scenario. Again, life in or life on the streets, where crime and danger and unpredictability, it goes hand in hand with the friendly nature of friendship, camaraderie, and hanging out and just wanting to have a good time and just living life, while at the same time being so close to danger and crime and perhaps, yes, even violence and death. And so there are all those components there in terms of the external world and the environment, or the examination of the environment, and how the environment affects, and the people that inhabit that environment affect our main characters, like Harvey Keitel's Charlie. Now, I mentioned two components too. So there's the external world, and there's also the interior examination, which is another great aspect of the works of Martin Scorsese, including a work like Mean Streets, because what this film also gives room for, or what it affords, is an interior examination of Charlie and what it is he sees, or how he perceives himself, how he perceives, say, himself from the viewpoint of a type of existential nature, also from a religious nature, and how those viewpoints or perspectives from him about himself, how they affect his interactions with the world around him and the people around him. And so it affects his, say, relationship with Teresa, the Amy Robinson character, in a very intriguing and perhaps from a certain point of view questionable manner. It also affects the way in which he views the Robert De Niro character, Johnny Boy, and his relationship there. There is a friendship and camaraderie. There's also a type of maybe somewhat a brotherly type of relationship or regard in that respect. Also, when we're thinking about the insular nature of Harvey Keitel's character's perspective, we also realize too that it is linked, or it is potentially linked, to how he views a type of a sense of religion, a sense of guilt, a sense of sacrifice, and how this is related to his almost worldview, or a religious view when it comes to his life in his sort of daily life on the one hand, and also the potential or the concept of eternal damnation and the pain of hell, and how that concept of hell and damnation and guilt form a real tight bond with how he views the world and how he regards characters. And what it might be said that on the one hand, that regard or that viewpoint or that perspective could be coming from a place of sincere, say, moral authenticity from a subjective viewpoint, from the vantage point of Charlie on the one hand, but at the same time, one begins to question and wonder just how positive such viewpoints are, especially when we see the effects that they have on the character relationships that are at play here, as well as we take a step back as viewers and think, as we are absorbed and almost mesmerized, and as we are swept up by the grand sweep and appeal of this world, we also realize how dangerous it is. And when we think and realize and wonder about the danger, we also are afforded the opportunity to question whether or not indeed these perspectives espoused by Charlie and others are indeed morally sound ones, or perhaps there is something more questionable and more somewhat ambiguous and much more morally, say, unstable, that leads to yet further complicated questioning and further complicated viewing dynamics on the part of the viewer, thus making this film, I think, a very compounded and quite a rich and complex viewing experience, and I think purposefully so, because in the hands of a great master like Martin Scorsese, we have the moral ambiguity and complexity of the nature of these characters that is at the same time intertwined with, or unabashedly or unashamedly, showing us the naked face of the characters, warts and all. And in that examination, in that rich expose, as it were, we also get deep connections with human beings who are fallible, who are not without fault, but they are undeniably human. And like all humans, they make successes, they make good choices, they also make errors, and they make bad choices. And I think Martin Scorsese does not shy away from that. He shows us the sweep, and he shows us the almost the magnetic, almost paranoia of the world, while also showing us the mundane and the simple, as well as showing us the dark and disturbing, and also showing us the sort of the corporeal versus the ethereal. And it shows us the day-to-day life sort of on the streets, but also how this potentially has sweeping consequences or sweeping implications that are of a maybe celestial nature or religious nature, or indeed, yes, eternal damnation, and all of that that implies, both on a psychological journey, also in terms of an emotional journey and spiritual journey, and yes, in terms of a mental journey and physical journey, because always too we have the threat of violence, and we have the physical interactions that can be both loving and intimate and fulfilling desire, but also can be very dangerous and haphazard and unexpected and chaotic. And this is the nature of the streets. This is Mean Streets. So this is just a true classic, an iconic film, and it is from the hands of Martin Scorsese and company, and we have such confidence, such assured style. It almost has the sense of a nouvelle vague, a filmmaking aesthetic. There are quirks, there are beautiful stylistic quirks of editing and the like, and sound that make for an endless source of conversation in terms of the filmmaking craft, which is, of course, another aspect of the great genius of Martin Scorsese. And Mean Streets is a prime example of that, my friends, as well as the capturing of these brilliant performances from these brilliant actors. Now we have the great duo here of Harvey Keitel and Robert De Niro, and they each bring a type of different sense of energy and volatility to the table in terms of the ever cool command, or the attempt at having a cool, commanding presence that we see Charlie, the Harvey Keitel character, trying to incorporate while hearing his inner monologue and his voice, or the voices. I use the word plural because sometimes we might hear his voice, or maybe we are hearing the voice of someone else, which is one of the clever aspects of this film as well. It starts off from the very beginning, the clever use of voiceover technique to indicate some kind of expose or entry into the inner world, the inner sanctum, as it were, of the soul, the heart and soul of Charlie as he regards the world around him. And as regards the idea of guilt and salvation, played out and manifest in his eyes in very real world terms, in terms of the streets, the mean streets. And this is played out from his perspective, vis-a-vis his relationships with many characters here. For example, the relationship with the Amy Robinson character, as well as the relationship with the Robert De Niro character, and how that feeds into this idea of guilt, maybe sacrifice, self-sacrifice, as well as the idea of a type of battlefield for the soul, battlefield of good versus evil. But perhaps that viewpoint, with all of its religious connotations, from the viewpoint of characters like Charlie, etc., perhaps that viewpoint is not so easily clean-cut and as one might think. And perhaps, as I said earlier, there is room for the questioning of the moral high ground of that type of viewpoint as espoused by Charlie and others. And that leads to this really rich room and landscape for this idea of probing and moral questioning, and whether or not we are seeing characters that are wholly good or wholly not so good. And I think the point, however, is not to paint things in these two-dimensional fashions, and indeed that's something that Scorsese does not do. But in fact, on the contrary, he gives us these direct portraits, these true-to-life portraits, these authentically rendered portraits, with frailties and failings as well as successes and earnest attempts at trying to do something with their lives, whatever the context of their lives may be, and whatever those choices lead them towards. And what those choices mean for these characters can be very funny, very humorous, very meaningless, very much just part of the day-to-day lives and activities of these people, or it could be something more significant and more severe, and perhaps even more long-lasting in terms of one's life now and one's life beyond, one's physical being, and also one's soul and one's salvation, and also one's understanding and viewpoint of oneself vis-a-vis the rest of the world. And that world here is the world of mean streets. Okay, my dear friends, so that is Mean Streets, and I must say that this is such an exciting film for me. I remember seeing it for the first time many years ago, and it was like a type of it was like a life-changing thing. And to become more engaged in the works of Martin Scorsese became another great avenue of my own personal film journey or cinema journey. And that is also to say, as I mentioned earlier, that this is not the last time that we will see the name Martin Scorsese mentioned over the course of the 31 days. So I hope to see you on future days where we might speak about other works by him. But for now, for today, we have Mean Streets. Okay, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very much appreciate it. Truly, I do. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.